and welcome to the Shit They Do Not Tell You What About podcast. And my name is Steve Green. And today we are joined by my wife, Nikki Limo.
Hi, I'm Nikki Limo, and you're listening to Shit They Don't Tell You.
But most significantly today, we have a very special guest. His name is Ben Yorke. He is the VP of what do you call it? Socials? At Woo?
Ecosystem is the official term.
Thank you.
Ecosystem.
And thank you so much for coming, Ben. I've been following Woo for a long time. I was first buying Woo in May of 2021. And you are by far, I think, I've been in crypto since 2013. You are by far, I think, the most communicative and clear community person I have ever dealt with in the crypto space.
Well, it's nice you put the pressure on before I bumble through this podcast.
I doubt you could bumble any more than the preamble. The preamble is pretty bumbly. Well, today we wanted to talk to you about, obviously crypto. You're involved in crypto with Woo, which is an exchange. You guys do a lot of DeFi stuff. You do a lot of CeFi stuff. But starting more with the greater crypto space right now, a lot of people who listen to this show have heard me talk about crypto for many years. But I've never had somebody on like you who really knows the ins and outs of it, literally works in it every day. What Ben Yorke is cryptocurrency?
It's funny because I've probably done about 50 to 100 podcasts over the years, and every single one of them have been with very crypto-focused people. So I don't think I've ever had that question before. I tend to step back a little bit, and I think of it more as just the digitalization of things. Even things that touch your daily life, like owning your own data, owning your own assets. And in many ways, breaking up a lot of the things of, what we call the Web 2 world, where you have some company with millions of users, and all of these people are generating business for this company, and like 99% of the value accrues to that company, while the people who are the content creators or the people who are building the network, are just along for the ride. That's kind of the larger scope. Cryptocurrency is one asset within that. And, it's popular with things like Dogecoin and Bitcoin and things like that. I think we'll get a little bit further into it. But yeah, that's kind of a step back.
Yeah. And I know everyone asks you this, but my audience hasn't heard this. What got you into the space?
Oh, amazing. Well, I'm originally from the U.S., if you can't tell from the accent.
A little bit.
Also from California, San Diego. So right down the road from where you
bro.
used to
That's crazy.
get stuck in traffic. Yeah. Picking up Nikki on her first dates.
Yes, I was in Poway. I was in Rancho Bernardo.
Oh, no way. Okay. Yeah. I was out actually in East County. Grew up there. Alpine, if you want to name.
No kidding. I can picture you in vans now, actually.
Oh, for sure. Warped Tour, all that stuff. But then in 2009, it was like right after the great financial crisis, and I was studying business and things like that, and everyone was just like a Debbie Downer about, the economy is shit, there's no jobs. So I ended up just thinking, like, what's the craziest thing I could do? I want to travel around the world, and after a few stops, I ended up in China. Kind of got stuck there for a few years, just enjoying my young adult life. And eventually, at that time, China was really driving the space. So all the big exchanges, things like Binance, right? They originated in China. All the miners, if your listeners are familiar with the mining scene, they're the people who secure the network. They're all from China. And then a lot of the early projects were all there too. So being that I learned the language, and then I also am a good communicator, which you mentioned earlier. I was kind of a natural fit to just volunteer in these communities. And then eventually they're like, hey, this guy, he's pretty sharp. So they started giving me roles. And eventually that's how I met Woo. And that was the first project that I really sunk my teeth into. And, it's been now close to 3 years, which is an eternity in crypto.
It really is.
Yeah, that's how I got into it.
Is Woo, you work at Woo. Would you say that everyone kind of sees crypto in the same way, or is there fractures even inside of it? Like, as we're in this like market downturn, right? Is there just like unbridled enthusiasm and I work for Woo and we got this? Or is it really like, people see the crypto community writ large and think, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think especially I'd say the first, we're at about 170 employees now full time. And then we probably have a few other hundred in, different companies that work closely with us. So it's a large ecosystem. And then I would say the early people, they were exactly like you and me, just like hungry, live and breathe crypto. And that's what you need at a startup. When you're at a startup, you need the first 20 employees to just die for the company. And that's what gets you off the ground. That was what I tried to embody, and that's the culture I tried to instill. Passion for what we're doing first, and then all the other financial bullshit that comes with crypto is like a secondary thing.
Yeah.
I think now we've scaled a lot, and as companies grow, they start to introduce people who are very specialized. So, for example, if you have like a data scientist, like maybe this person's not living and breathing Woo Merch like you are,
yes, sir.
But they're still very,
a little bit.
But they're still very dedicated. And we're trying to attract talent from some of the top companies in the world, whether they're financial firms like Goldman Sachs or they're Google, these type of companies. So we're now leveraging a lot of their experience and combining that with our passion. And I think the culture, though, is very strong. Everyone who talks about us, who met us, it's like, wow, these guys, good sense of ethics and a good sense of culture, which is important to the brand.
What would you say DeFi is?
Okay, DeFi it's kind of a subsection of crypto, which is basically focused on taking the old financial markets and then opening them up to everybody, and at the same time making it, I guess we'd say, interoperable, which means this application can communicate with another application, right? Which is something we don't have in these like walled gardens that are your bank or Facebook, right? So DeFi is about putting your assets on there and then doing everything you do in the financial world, whether it's earning yield or lending or borrowing, saving, these type of things. So that's I guess DeFi in a nutshell.
Do you see DeFi as a disruptor? Is that kind of a narrative, or is it something that you think has legs?
Oh, I absolutely think it has legs, because even this year, I mean, you had the whole Silicon Valley Bank, blowing up. And a lot of that is exactly what people in crypto experienced with FTX last year, right? Where you have some centralized company who's, controlling your assets, and then they're loaning those out to somebody else who's loaning those out to someone else. And, right?
Classic.
So, yeah. I mean, that's what DeFi is. I mean, you can go to the blockchain and you can see exactly where the assets are sitting, right? And that's the most important value.
Okay, Ben, what is a decentralized exchange exactly?
Well, okay, so an exchange is basically a platform that lets you buy or sell assets, right? So you can kind of equate that to, if you're investing on something like Robinhood, right? That would be something like an exchange. And so a decentralized exchange is just one where everybody self-custodies. I guess for people who don't know, that basically means your assets are in your wallet, which you control. And then you interact with the decentralized exchange by sending it to something on the blockchain, which then triggers some response, and then something else gets sent back to your wallet. So you never actually have to go stand in line at a bank, put your assets there, and then go log into the web portal, and deal with it there. And then in the hope that when you're done investing or doing whatever, the bank or the institution will still have your money waiting for you. And there's a lot of other benefits, because, they eventually become something like Legos, where you can just build on top. You can use things like aggregators, where you don't care which exchange you're actually sending it to. You just want the best price. So you put it in and it breaks up your order and sends it to a bunch of different places. But, these are more complicated topics, and probably not the most exciting thing in the world to talk about, but it's one of the businesses that we do.
What excites you the most about crypto?
I guess it does feel like you're always on the brink of a revolution, right? I think that got me into it a little bit, like the ideology behind Bitcoin, and, the federal government no longer can print your money out of existence. Inflation's been a hot topic in the news for good reason. It was 8 or 9% in the US. People are losing that each year. And then with crypto, it's a lot more transparent. So that's more of the bigger picture. But I also love the more, we call it like the degen side of things, like degenerate side. It's kind of a euphemism just for how if you have an idea and you just want to go for it, right? You can act on that very quickly, right? And the cycles for the market are very, very fast. So one day you're up and one day you're down, and that opportunity is constantly coming around. So, you see people who got into the space maybe 2 years ago, and then they've done very well for themselves, right? And so seeing that, like, that's not something that's so easy to do in the traditional world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, dude, in the traditional world, it just moves at a snail's pace. I can't even get interested in traditional finance anymore.
Exactly. It's like watching a game of golf or something.
For real. No hate to the golfer fans out there. It's just a bad sport. Objectively, bad sport. But Ben, isn't it bad and very, very wrong that people can't see what people in crypto are doing with their money? Isn't that a crime, Ben Yorke?
In what sense could you?
Well, in like the DeFi sense, right? Like a lot of pushback I get on.
Isn't that what drug dealers do?
Yeah, with the cash.
Isn't it for drug dealers?
Exactly.
To do shady transactions.
Yeah. Every time I get pushback on crypto, it's always this topic, right? It's always like, why do you need the privacy?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how old you are, Steve, but I'm about 35, so. Okay, we're about the same age. I mean, we went through the internet. We went through things like chat rooms, and my parents were saying, "Oh, you're gonna get abducted by pedophiles." Like we went through this whole phase with the internet, and like privacy and censorship and these sort of topics are never going to go away from our society. If we do allow that to happen, it's a massive failure of the society. And for the financial world, I think it's no different. Right now, a lot of the issues are around like, money laundering or getting around some of the sanctions that maybe the U.S. has, leveraged around the world. Those are more big concerns, I think, for governments. But on the day-to-day stuff, it's a lot easier to buy drugs with cash. Trust me, I was just in Bangkok for a month, and nobody's using crypto to do that sort of thing, right? So. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely overblown, but it's something that at the early stage of an industry, the innovators are there along with the people who are more opportunistic and maybe in it for the wrong reasons. So, and that's why you see a lot of these like cash grabs. We call them rug pulls and things like that. So, I mean, if crypto in general just makes it easier to store your money, to move your money, to transact. So that's always going to lead to concerns, and I think we'll get a handle on that. Working with some sort of regulation. And it's either going to be, hopefully a scenario where innovation will outpace the need for restriction, right? And long term, I think it's going to be fine, right? We're going to have this digital assets, owning your own data, these sort of things. That's going to happen.
Yeah, I think so too. But kind of piggybacking off of that, right? You're inside of a larger crypto project. You guys issued a token. Another thing that I get questions about is like, well, why do you need a token? You guys are just copying Bitcoin if you're making another token. You know those arguments, right? What do you say about that?
Exactly. Well, I think any sort of asset can be a token, right? It doesn't have to be a currency. Like what Bitcoin tries to do, what Dogecoin, these kind of things, they're intended to be some sort of like method of payment for something that will, that's probably not the easiest route to success because most people don't need this in their lives. They're happy to slide their credit cards or do whatever. What our token, it's more of a utility token, so we think of breaking up the company, and then accessing the company with this token. So you can get services, and the more that you contribute to this network, the more opportunities there are to earn in this token. And that's important. I mean, for people who know things like Ethereum, right, they recently moved to proof of stake, right? So, owning Ethereum, it's kind of like you own a stake of the network. And so all the value that accrues on that network accrues not to shareholders or the board of directors, it's accruing to token holders. So that's like the theme of like democratization of businesses.
And so when you guys issue a token, how does that benefit the community, or how does that or versus some company with shares?
Well, I think it's like why would anyone care, right? If a bank opens up in your town, and they're offering these services. And like, unless you need those services, you're not going to care, right? But with the token, it brings along the idea of like community, and then you start to realize that if I do contribute, if I do participate, if I am creating value, then I will be rewarded, right? So that's like the token economy, and this method, I think we're going to be seeing, a lot more. We at the very beginning, you see some of these items like airline miles. It's the same concept. It just exists in like a walled garden, right? You take a flight, you get some airline miles, you buy something and get the VIP lounge, you earn more miles, right? So that's value accrual to the consumer of the airline. But the problem is, if you suddenly don't like that airline, it's meaningless. It's worthless because you can't take that to some other airline, right? So that's how, cryptocurrency and the ideas of interoperability are what I believe clearly the way forward.
Is there anybody working on that use case, by the way? Because that's one of the most kick-ass ones, I think, in the space. Like being able to take being able to basically open up, points and rewards and all that stuff, and to be able to democratize those and let people use them and sell them even would be incredible.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because, like the airline industry is very difficult to disrupt, and it's, they're not in a hurry to relinquish, the hold they have. But it's one of those things where once it happens first, then everybody has to follow. So I think, down the line, I mean, even we're seeing things like social networks now, where Twitter, was owned by Jack Dorsey. He was a big Bitcoin believer. Now it's Elon Musk, who's an even bigger like cryptocurrency believer.
He's a Doge boy.
Yeah, he is. And we're starting to see like social networks. I think this is probably one of the most obvious use cases where, if you're out there hustling, making videos and making memes and, just generating a ton of attention for the network, you deserve your share of that, right? And then that network value should be able to move more freely throughout the internet, right? So I think this is just a matter of time before people become comfortable. I think some of the big changes we're going to have to see in the next 10 years, and that actually some really smart people are working on, is things like abstracting the account. Because right now, if you've ever used crypto, it's like the first thing you do, you set up a wallet, you have to write down these 12 words, and you have to hope to God you don't lose them or write them down or wrong or something, or if somebody finds it, they can just steal all your money. Like these sort of things are not good user experience. And so when this sort of problem gets solved to where anyone can just set up an account really quickly and they still maintain control, in some ways, like the private key gets split up and put on separate cloud servers. And, at that point, suddenly the line between cryptocurrency and those airline points, it's a lot more similar, right? Because you don't have to worry about like, what if I lose my phone and then all my stuff's gone forever, right? So these are some things that we're seeing being built alongside, and they will help bring in these next use cases. Because right now it's not ready. I'll be the first one to tell you, like, there is no way that my mom is going to, put her, part of her life savings into cryptocurrency. And I accept that. And I think it's good because it shows we're still early. There's a lot of room to contribute to this industry. And going back to what Nikki said, like what excites you is, I guess, you're doing something that's still meaningful. Like if you're just pushing papers on a desk 9 to 5, it's a lot harder to influence the company and the industry in a way that's meaningful.
How do you see the economic conditions we're in right now with inflation and crypto as a potential disruptor? Is that a narrative too, or are you see? How do you see it?
Oh, it's for sure a narrative. It's always going to be a narrative, right? And actually, I'm not that close to this kind of like what we call macro investing, and I'm much more focused on like my day-to-day role, which is growing Woo Network, but there's no doubt that as more governments, make mistakes, as more people become aware, like we're seeing people be a lot more financially literate in the last 20 years. Like when we were kids, your parents, they might have had like a retirement like 401k or something like that, but they weren't investing in Tesla or Amazon. These sort of things happen kind of more recently. Now you have a lot of people younger than us, in high school even, who are stock portfolios, crypto portfolios. And so as these people get older, right, they grew up with crypto, they'll be used to it. And they're also more aware of, what happens in the financial system. What does this inflation number actually mean? And that's when we could see the effect. It might not be one of those like all at once everybody wakes up and goes, shit, that crypto is a good idea. But, it's probably going to happen.
Do you think that Ethereum, like the layer 2 landscape, is there anything about it that you're like, that project, or do you see it all as kind of one big landmass and it's all very good for the ecosystem?
For us, I think we're a lot more agnostic. So, we service traders, essentially. We service people who want to trade at the best price, and wherever they go, we can be there. And however, personally, I was pretty early into the Ethereum DeFi space. I was actually quite lucky because one of my earlier roles, they assigned me to write about DeFi. And, that's how I got to learn about it. But even back to like 2017, when I was getting into the industry, like there was a lot of things that were billed as like the next Ethereum killer. Like, this is going to kill Ethereum. It's going to be better than Ethereum. And yeah, I mean, you can't, there's something to be said for how conservative Bitcoin, conservative Ethereum, their teams, the foundations leading these and the developers that contribute, how conservative they are. And then how they do prioritize decentralization in a lot of ways. Whereas some of the smaller projects, it's just a core team and they do whatever the hell they want. So I think we'll never get away from Ethereum. Anything that seems to be coming is like this year, if you're following like these layer 2s, it's basically something built on top of Ethereum to make it faster and cheaper to make transactions. It all adds value back to Ethereum as a base layer. So and eventually I think the name Ethereum, it might be less important. It could be something like Amazon Web Services versus Google Cloud. You don't actually know what this app we're using to record this stream is running on right now, right? It could be either of those two.
Definitely not decentralized, I'll tell you that.
No, that's probably a good thing based on the current tech. But eventually that will become less important, and it'll just be like these networks with these layer 2 scaling solutions on top, and everything just works. That's the dream, right?
That's the dream. I think, like you said, I think we're a couple years away from that, but that is what I think. Man, when I look at Woo too, like, when I see what you guys are doing for back end liquidity, that's what got me into you guys, like big time. And can you describe what liquidity is and the need for back end liquidity?
Sure. And Nikki, I don't know if this is something you're as interested in, but I'll definitely answer this one for Steve.
I was going to ask that same question, to be honest. So
I talk about it all the time.
I want to know about back end liquidity.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest problems that faced cryptocurrency is like how available it is and how reliable it is, because big investors, they don't want to buy something and then when they want to exit their investment, they're not able to do that just because there's not enough assets on the market at the price they want, right? Or in order to sell it, they have to go to one specific venue, and that specific venue is under investigation by the SEC or whatever, and so their company framework doesn't allow them to even interact with that one, right? So this is more of a modern, like this year theme. In the past, it was just you had a bunch of shitty exchanges, for lack of a better word, and people were forced to do business there because there's nowhere else, right?
Shout out Bittrex.
Right. So originally we were incubated by a company. They're called Kronos Research, and what they specialize in is market making, which is providing liquidity on both sides so that if Nikki or Steve wants to go buy something, there's somebody willing to sell it to them at the market price. And if they want to sell it, there's someone willing to buy it back, right? That's market making at its core. And these market makers at the very early stage, they had this same problem because their only opportunities to make markets and earn money is to go to these shitty exchanges. And then some of them, they didn't have any users, so no one was buying from them. And some of the other exchanges were getting hacked. And then some of these other exchanges were just shady. So they were very reluctant to be everywhere, right? So then the idea came for just having one network and this company would go and they would be trading on these exchanges, and then they would provide liquidity from these exchanges into what is now Woo Network. So if you were a user or an institution, or just a trader, and you wanted to buy with the best liquidity in the market, you would come to us, and then you don't have to deal with all the other bullshit in the market. So that was kind of the idea behind it. That's still what we're doing today. Really focused on making sure that if you trade at Woo, the price you're paying for a transaction, which is actually made up of a couple of things, including like fees. It also includes like the price that they're willing to sell assets to you at. Net of all of this, like you get the best price. That's our mission in a lot of ways. So that's back-end liquidity. That's what we're doing, Nikki. Does it thrill you?
It does. I'm glad that that's what back-end liquidity is, and it's not as fecal as I pictured. I did want to ask about. Took you a second. I did want to ask about. I hear a lot of bitching about gas prices, and not for your car, but for tokens or cryptocurrencies. Does that have anything to do? Like, if I wanted to liquidate some of my assets, are there gas prices? Is that something that people are going? Sorry, I know Steve's cringing at me.
I'm not cringing. I'm actually just trying to understand your question.
He's being very supportive, Nikki.
I don't know anything about crypto. I defer to Steve. Like, if I had to invest my own money into crypto, all I know how to do is put it into Bitcoin. So a lot of the more complex stuff is like, I just need to learn bits and pieces of it. And the number one thing...
She won't be able to sell my Woo, Ben. She won't be able to sell my Woo.
No, I won't. I have to go through Kenny.
Yeah, my little brother. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he has some sort of safety hatch plan, like if something happens to him. But anyway...
he might be plotting against you.
He probably is. He'd be smart too.
Kenny?
I have a lot of Woo.
He should.
Yeah.
It's a good question, Nikki.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I was just going to say, that's related to something we were talking about earlier. And I think the early networks like Bitcoin, Ethereum, they just had no idea about the throughput, that would be required of these networks. And it's hard because everything is a trade-off between how decentralized you want it to be, how fast you want it to be, how secure you want it to be. And so to make something more decentralized, you have to bring in more people to validate things. And when you bring more people, it just takes more time for them to all reach what we call consensus, right? So that's a lot of the issue around that is it's just there's not a very high throughput, which means we can't have Visa where millions of people can purchase something at the same time. The network works perfectly. So most people complain about gas prices. They're talking about Bitcoin or Ethereum, and it tends to spike a lot during bull markets when everybody's crazy about crypto and they're buying and selling everything, and it's just madness. Mm-hmm. And then they don't mind as much because it's. But one good analogy I actually heard on this is it's kind of like living in LA, and I think Steve can address this as well, or living in New York. When you're living in these cities, you do have the best restaurants, the best entertainment, the best nightclubs, everything. And so you pay a premium for that. And that is rent prices or tolls or parking, right? So that's what these early networks, that's what the people on there are doing. And then maybe there's people who don't want to live in, LA. Maybe they're happy living in Bakersfield or somewhere else. And, these gas costs are a lot less for them, but they're using a network that's maybe not as secure or maybe doesn't have as good of apps on it. So that's kind of the current landscape. And then the goal, what we were talking about earlier with layer 2, is to make networks that don't compromise on security and decentralization, but they're just as fast, right? And they're just as cheap. And so maybe in 2 to 4 years, we'll have that. And then suddenly the whole ecosystem just becomes a lot more usable, better user experience.
That's such a good way of putting it, that is why you're the community guy at Woo and I am the unaffiliated hype man. Very well put.
I know a lot about how interested Steve is in Woo, but I just don't know a lot about Woo itself. So it's interesting to hear the ins and outs of.
We're going to really get to Woo as well. Real quick though, another real quick landscape question that I have is, also Woo related. When FTX goes down, you guys made a big move. You guys basically go, hey, we're going to open up, we're going to let you guys see what's in our reserves. I think it's an industry first. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, well, the way we did it was with a real-time dashboard where people can see. We benefited a little bit in that we're a little bit younger than some of the other big players in the space. So we didn't have years and years of bad practices and, maybe we call it like cutting corners, like some of the other big exchanges have. So it's much more difficult for something like that to happen at a bigger exchange. But it's a huge opportunity for us because FTX was positioned a little bit similarly in the market to us in that they service their tagline was for traders by traders, right? And so they were servicing a lot of the users that we plan to service or we currently are servicing. So when they blew up, it's like now we have an opportunity to look at what they did really well because they did a lot of things really well. And that's why they had such spectacular growth up until the point where they started lending out money like a traditional bank, right? Yeah. So it's like if we take those good parts and then what did they do wrong? Well, they weren't transparent. They didn't show people where their assets are, right? Like, can we do this? And at first it was kind of like from a communication standpoint or a PR standpoint, typically when there's this big crisis, you want to step back a little bit and like let things settle because everyone's angry, everybody's scared and everyone's emotional and you don't want to just be the first one out there because you get your head blown off. Actually I was a little bit more tentative, but our CEO, he was like, we have to do this, right? We have to be first. If the business model is going to work, this is how we got to do it. And I was really impressed at that time by that action. And,
I was blown away, bro, blown away. Mm-hmm. And you guys made it so that you can view the balance sheets in real time every 15 minutes of updates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And we're still planning to build a lot more interesting things on that coming soon. But yeah, I think now we definitely have our position, right, where it's best for trading, best prices, lowest fees, and most transparent. Like that's what we want people to think of Woo as, right? And, maybe the other exchanges, maybe they have, more shit coins or more NFTs or more, other things that appeal to people and can maybe more like get rich quick type stuff. But we want to focus on the core business and we want to focus on doing things the right way. So that's what we're trying to do.
When you're doing that, like that's because it's such a big move that you guys made. Internally, when FTX is going down, what's the mood at Woo? Is it like our biggest competitors going down? Fuck yeah. Or is it like this sucks a little bit because obviously market wide, it was annihilation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, anytime financial companies start to collapse, you have this thing called the contagion where suddenly you find out this guy was actually lending money to them and they're gone too. And who were they servicing? Because now suddenly they have a big hole in their balance sheet. So we were definitely not like pumping our fists. Like we were definitely worried like what's going to happen next? Who's going to go bankrupt? Like are some of like the biggest trading firms in the world, are they going to go under? And then, what happens to liquidity? Is Binance also screwed? Is Coinbase screwed? You don't know. Right. And that could be like a doomsday scenario. And then on top of that, you also have at the back of your head, like, oh shit, what are regulators going to do now? Like, what are the governments going to come in and just start chopping off heads?
We're kind of seeing that in the U.S. right now, a little bit, but not for you guys.
Kind of, yeah. Well, we don't service U.S. customers, so
exactly.
Nothing we do.
Much to your benefit.
We actually made the right move there. It was very criticized at the start, but. It was
the first guy booing, and I'm the happiest guy in the world about it. I was the first guy booing, though. I'll tell you that right now. I'll own that right now.
Yeah. I mean, like growing a business, it's kind of like going onto a playground for the first time. It's like, how many fights do you want to pick? Who do you want to pick them with? And we just didn't think we wanted to devote resources to picking just dealing with this constant legal battle, and that turned out to be the right move. But actually, going back to that FTX thing, when it crashed, Bitcoin barely dropped from like, I think 20K to 16K. And we're suddenly like, okay, this is it. This is good, right? Because the second biggest exchange can blow out. A bunch of other CeFi, lending platforms blew out. And the market barely reacted to it. So that's when we all kind of looked around and thought, okay, maybe maybe we've hit our market bottom for this cycle, and maybe things are turning around. And so far, if you look at today, Bitcoin from 16, now it's up around 30,000. That looks to be the case, right? So fingers crossed that nothing else is going to come of all this. And yeah, I think in general, the market just, it's very saturated with this bad news. It's like the regulation stuff. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. If the US regulators say something one time, the first time, everybody panics and shits themselves. And then after they've done it for the 10th year in a row, like investors just don't care anymore. It's already priced in. Yeah. So that's hopefully where we're at now. And, regulators also realize that. And so then things, they have to work together more with companies to try to make sure they're operating in a good way.
So we're going to go on a quick break real quick, but when we come back, we're going to go deep on Woo. I got a bunch of Woo questions with Ben Yorke. We will BRBLOL. Buy whatever we tell you to buy. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for listening to our podcast. We just want to take a break to tell you thanks for listening to our podcast. And if you want to rate it, that would be really awesome for us.
Listen, we're on break. We're not talking to you like podcast hosts right now. We're just talking to you like people.
As a friend.
And we just want to say, please rate the show because it helps out huge amounts.
Like, we're not desperate. We're kind of desperate.
We're giving shout outs right now to all the people who are giving it ratings. So huge shout out right now to Brian Jorgensen. That was sick of you, dude. Thank you. God bless. Huge shout out right now to Mark W. in Springfield, Connecticut.
Back to our podcast.
Jenny Blythe.
Hey, back to our podcast.
In Tuscany,
and
Florida.
Back to our podcast.
God bless you. Thank you.
Steven.
Thank you for supporting the show.
All right, and we're back. And you may have noticed I haven't said very much during this episode. That's because I'm a very, very, not even a beginner. I'd say I know nothing at all. I'm just soaking a lot of this in. I think that it's just so rare that we get to have an expert on the show. I, of course, have a lot of beginnery questions, but I think the best place to get those baseline questions answered, if you're also in the beginner boat, is to go check out Crypto Corner at patreon.com/sticky, STIKKI. Steve does more than 2 hours sometimes, but at least a 2-hour live stream every single week, every single Tuesday. He answers every question that anyone has on the stream about everything. So I think that's really great for those of you in my boat. But in this episode, I'm so impressed and intrigued to hear what someone with so much expertise has to say on a more complex level that I think some of you more advanced people in crypto might want to hear. So I'm just here being a student and listening with Franklin.
And if you're listening and not watching, Ben, I promise my wife does not look like a melted candle in real life. Her feed is coming weird. Is
it? On my end, it looks fine. She's a very attractive
woman. I will have
I'm
you
not.
know.
My mask is coming off. My meta mask is.
Yeah, exactly.
Was that a thing? I used a crypto term.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to fit in. I'm trying to be cool. Yeah. Thank you.
So we're back with Ben, and this is what I call Ben's 30 minutes of pure financial advice. So here we go. No, not at all. So Ben, what when you're out and about, I go through this all the time because I'm wearing Woo stuff everywhere I go. People are like, hey, what is Woo? And I'm always like, I wonder how Ben answers this. Like, what's your elevator pitch on Woo for people, for layman's?
To be honest, it's a bit of too many steps to take. So, I'll often meet people like maybe it's like an Uber driver. They're like, oh, you in crypto? I'm into crypto. And then,
I've been there.
I won't go straight into the Woo side. I usually just, answer any questions they have and try to be helpful. And I think, showing them that not everyone's like this massive fanboy, focusing on the purely like financial side of things, which is like, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire. Right. So I just try to do that as well. It's funny you mentioned that today. I was at the office and there's this company that brings around lunches, right? And you can like order off them. It's like a typical office thing. Right. And, the guy is like, he looked at us I think he noticed some things like, oh, you guys are crypto traders. And I was like, well, we actually run an exchange. He's like, oh, I trade crypto too. And it was just really funny to see that these sort of people are more and more common, I think, than they were like 3 or 4 years ago.
So true.
And yeah, so like we joked, we showed him the app and the website, and he was all stoked about it, and he was going to sign up. So I think with some people, if they show a bit of understanding, then I might give them a quick pitch. I might just say, we're doing everything that, you trade on some other exchange, but, we try to do it a little bit better and more transparent and, doing things the right way. And yeah, I think especially in certain parts of the world, you see it a lot. The funny story, I was actually, we were in Thailand, and then I was just by the beach, and there's this total, this little stall, and the guy in there. And in this part of Thailand, there's not enough electricity, so they black out during the noon hours during the day. Like, there's no electricity, so the credit card scanner wouldn't work.
Oh, shit.
So I just asked him, I was like, will you take crypto? And he's like, yeah, crypto, I have Binance. And I was like, all right, I'll send you some USDT from my MetaMask.
No way.
Yeah. So I think in different parts of the world, especially, like it's more common. So this conversation you asked me, like, I think I'm going to have to keep upgrading my pitch because people are just going to become more and more knowledgeable as we go.
So true. I wrote a bunch of movies and stuff, and the pitches are so important, bro. Getting in and out of your point quickly and letting everyone know how sick your thing is. I don't know, something real valuable to it. How'd you guys land on Woo as a name? Half the time I tell people I love Woo, they think I'm into some shitcoin, which is so ironic because, like, you guys are actually a really deep, like, liquidity provider, like all these awesome CeFi and DeFi options. How do you come at Woo? And is there any controversy internally about the name?
No, to be honest, the CEO, Jack, I mean, he came up with the name. He's pretty good at coming up with these sort of things. He has a creative mind. He's more of like the visionary type, which is what you want in a CEO. So Woo in particular, he made the joke that it's kind of like the sound you make when you make a good trade, right? And you close that trade. It's so, and it's also in a lot of other foreign languages, like in Korean. There's a lot of positive images that come with this name, and Chinese as well. So it's a very like universal name. It's easy to remember. I don't think we're looking to change it. I mean, maybe something like Go Trade.
I don't think you should change it.
I don't think you should. I love it.
No.
I just, when I talk to people, they immediately assume it's some shitcoin because how shitcoins are. Like, they just make it. It's like a noise. At least it's not Woo Inu.
Well, hopefully we can help you out by, doing better on the branding and awareness. And then they'll hear about it first, and then they'll learn about it. And then when they see you walking down the street, they'll be like, oh shit, it's the Iceman. Look at him.
Yeah.
Bro, the Iceman's been carrying you guys for 2 years now almost. This will be 2 years in May. I've been carrying the Woo marketing for 2 years, just about.
How many chains of Woo do you have? I mean, not blockchains, but the chains behind you.
Got them all over the place.
I'm asking Ben how many he has.
Oh, yeah, true. Exactly.
How many does he have? He should have a lot because he's an executive. Maybe
I'll send you one, Ben.
Yeah, you should send him one.
I'll send him one.
Yeah, I actually do not have. I'm actually wearing a shirt right now.
I see it.
Yeah, but most of what I get is stuff that we hand out at like conferences or things. So it's easy to carry, and you can print hundreds of them. So it's things like shirts, luggage tags, things like that.
You're kind of a normie compared to me, then. Yeah, totally.
I'm very much a normie. Yeah, and I'm in awe when I see the Iceman walking around in the drip.
I know. I can tell. For you, when is something just a narrative, and when is it something that is addressing a market need, kind of like what you guys are up to?
I think every narrative is an opportunity for something, right? And so, like currently now, you have the L2 narrative. It's a very strong one, right? And you can see the people who are developing these L2s. These are not companies that popped up in the last 2 months to try to create this narrative, right? So that would be one. Other narratives are things like AI. Like, obviously, I think everyone in the world now is aware what AI can do thanks to Chat GPT and things like that. So I think, in crypto, from a product development standpoint, we try to be very agile. We don't try to like sit down and say, okay, the next 3 years, this is what it's going to look like. We're going to start working on this, and then we're going to work on that. It's more like, what is the most immediate needs for our core users? How do we make their lives better, right? A little bit of a focus on like the long-term strategy, where we're trying to go, what is our mission? But then a third part is definitely like, what are the new things? What are the exciting things that are happening now that didn't exist 4 months ago? And then is it something that's sustainable? Is it something that we can build on? And I think, going back, it's hard to pick too many trends, maybe like the dog coins or the food coins, like those were stupid narratives. But even things like NFTs is like a separate type of token that has unique aspects to it, right? Like there's a lot of really interesting things you can do there in terms of like, connecting with your users and creating this sort of brand identity, right? So, to answer your question, every time a new narrative comes up, it's usually pretty exciting, although it is distracting. I would definitely say, especially during a bull market, and then something pops up, and then people are like, "Oh, dude, you gotta get that!" Like that happened nonstop in the last bull market. Great example was UST. Like if you guys are familiar with Luna.
Extremely, trust me.
Okay.
I was captain of the ship that was going down, brother. Ship was on fire and we were going down.
Yeah, well, it was like a $40 billion failure that happened overnight, and it was basically like locking up your assets and getting 20% yields, which is completely out of thin air, to mint this stable coin. And then everybody wanted this stable coin, and that was mainly due to like the financial success of Luna, the coin. And from a trader's perspective, we're like, why would anyone want to trade their assets against a stable coin that's not proven, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And then, just after months and months of dealing with community, and we're trying to figure out ways to work with that ecosystem without putting our business in jeopardy, right? It kind of fell apart, and I wouldn't say we expected it to fall apart. It was not that. We weren't sitting there shorting it, waiting for it to fall. I think we were just. We want to see things be more battle tested over time. That's one of the good things about this type of like software development, where everyone can see the code. Like if you can hack this thing, someone's going to hack it.
Credit to you. So exactly. That's what I said when Luna died. I said credit to them, dude. Credit to the attackers. That's how this kind of works, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, we get that a lot. There's some new trend. Guys, you got to do this. And we can't be too distracted by it, but then we still have to have a very open mind. And I think having one of the first questions you asked me tonight, like, are people in Woo, are they passionate? I think that is the key factor, because if we're actively learning in our spare time and thinking about it, we're much better at grasping these narratives than if we're just showing up to our day job and doing what's told of us. Right?
Hey, so you guys, trade free, right? That's literally on my hoodie. Okay. How do you support that model? A lot of people always ask me that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this is kind of a nuanced question to answer, because there's some degree of understanding how financial markets work to explain that. I think a very simple way, it's actually not that simple, Nikki. I apologize if this doesn't make any sense at all. Like, going back to that original question, like how do, Nikki, your question about the liquidity on the back end. If the price that we're willing to sell at and the price that we're willing to buy at, if it's too close together, then people who are very fast and have inside knowledge are able to exploit that. And so on other platforms, you have a whole bunch of market makers, and then you have these people who are exploiting these market makers. And so to compensate these market makers for getting exploited, they charge fees. They charge really high fees, and then they give a rebate to the market makers. So they're basically subsidizing them. They're paying them to not lose as much money on certain actions, right? So what we did is we created an environment where we don't have these toxic firms, which is called like high frequency trading firms. If you're familiar with things like Robinhood, there's a firm behind it called Citadel, and Citadel is one of the most widely successful financial companies in the world over the last decade. And so we basically created an environment where companies who have very advanced technology, insider knowledge, and speed, they wouldn't be able to exploit the model, so that we can keep the price, the buy and sell close without charging the end user, that would be you, Nikki, high fees, and then have to refund the market maker. So that's basically how we do it. Then the market maker is still earning money, because every time that there is a trade, then they're able to earn a very small percentage of that. That's called a spread. And then they are able to split that with us. Now, the curveball is on this, Steve, that as we're growing, we're seeing more opportunities. We're seeing things that didn't exist in 2020. Like there's more assets that are popping up that no one's ever heard of. More different types of products like perpetual swaps, like which are futures. If people follow this at all,
you guys are doing really well there.
Well, exactly. But there's just a lot more assets we need to market make for. So, over time, we might open it up to allow more market makers and adjust the business model. But basically, to go back and TLDR this whole thing, I mean, we try to keep things very efficient by keeping out toxic flow, toxic participants who are extracting value from the system without contributing very much value at all.
Hey, what's toxic flow?
Well, toxic flow would just be those very fast firms capitalizing on certain advantages. Right? So it's not you, Steve. It's not Nikki going in there and saying, "Hey, I got $5,000. I want to buy this with it." It's people with a lot of capital who go in and using very advanced technology and things like co-location, where they place servers very close to other servers, so they're faster than other people. I think that's probably the easiest way to answer that without going into a very
people
complex.
front running and all that kind of stuff.
Front running is a form of toxic flow, but that more impacts the user. That's more like you put a buy order and then somebody else sees that buy order and jumps in front of it so that you move your buy order forward, and then they sell it to you, and then they that's a different sort of thing. But that is also toxic.
I got a sandwich attack before. It wasn't fun. I'll tell you that. It wasn't fun.
Is it like they're making money off of like attrition? Is it attrition? Like just like little
arbitrage?
Thin arbitrage? Yeah. Where it's just like thin margins of like just thin value, like over time built up. Like that's what they're capitalizing on. The toxic flow
exactly.
people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
When people talk about you guys were incubated by Binance. How come you guys aren't competing with Binance? Right. Another question I get quite a bit.
Well, we weren't incubated. We were invested by Binance Labs. We're still quite close with them. I think like Binance and CZ, these types of people, they're very collaborative, and they realized very early on that if they're going to take on this task of bringing 1 billion people into crypto, they're going to need help. From other builders in the space, from other people lobbying the governments and the regulators to open up and be more progressive. And, he definitely appreciates, I should say Binance appreciates how innovative we are. And also part of our model, because I mentioned how we aggregate from other, I didn't mention this, but the liquidity backend, we're actually taking liquidity on other exchanges and providing it to users on WooX, so that when people take that on WooX, we actually hedge that back onto exchanges like Binance, right? So Binance actually gets transaction volume from us. So in that sense, it doesn't matter as much for the purpose of this call, but Binance would benefit from us getting a lot of volume, right? Maybe indirectly, and then our relationship with BSC, that's their own blockchain, is very strong. We're a very early builder. They put us in this like most valuable builder program where we mentored other projects. We have our partner Kronos, who has a venture capital firm themselves. They invest in a lot of projects who are also building on BSC. So I think in general, like just to take a step back, crypto is very collaborative, and you can have these discussions between companies that on the outside look like competitors. But in reality, if it's just me and Steve and Nikki, and we're selling assets on 2 different exchanges versus Steve and his extended family and all his friends and all his crypto buddies, right? And like all of them trading on different exchanges, then we think of like it as a big pie, right? And your slice of the pie is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Binance is not going to make any money by cutting us off and taking our market share. They're going to make their next whatever $100 billion or whatever they're trying to make by getting billions of people into crypto. And the only way they're going to do that is by working with other people who have the same, value innovation, this sort of mindset alongside them.
I mean, you guys are growing so fast with DeFi. I honestly been blown away by it. Like when I look at Woo, right, you guys are number 3, I think, on Avalanche right now in volume. Mm-hmm. How the hell did you guys grow that fast? And And is it the AVAX community? Is it like a strategy on your part? What are you guys doing behind the scenes to make that happen? Because I can see it.
So basically, DeFi is still very early, right? And then what we did is we brought some of our liquidity provision strategies it's basically simulating the liquidity on our exchange. We simulate it on chain. So that's a lot of jargon. But basically, if you're trying to swap on chain, the price that you get trading through our decentralized exchange is better than what you get on most other decentralized exchanges on major tokens. Not if you're trading like some dog food coin, right? But if like Bitcoin, Ethereum, stable coins like USDT, USDC, the price that we provide is usually more competitive. So basically, the only strategy was quite simple. I mean, we just went to the chains where there are a lot of users and volume. We plugged in, and then we talked to all the aggregators in the space who people go to their website and then they want to make a swap. Like, and even Nikki talked about MetaMask. There's a function in MetaMask where you can swap, but that doesn't actually happen inside MetaMask. They just route your order to somewhere, and that somewhere a lot of the times is us, because we have the most competitive prices. So that's going to be the strategy. We're going to increase, the amount of chains we're on. The amount of assets we support, and the amount of like applications. It could be a wallet. It could be, it could be some just like app, metaverse, NFT app that has crypto trading functions, and we'll get a lot of volume from that. We also have these things called cross-chain swaps, where if you're on one blockchain, like let's call it Binance Smart Chain, and you want to put assets onto something like Avalanche, then you can do it directly through WooFi. And so we're seeing a lot of users who have this need. They're coming to us now. So I think the fact that we're, if you continue to provide the best prices on a long-term time frame, like people are going to eventually, it's just going to become habitual where people just use that. So that's the attitude we're taking.
Do you think that's why you guys grew so fast in Avalanche versus like Polygon? Is just you're there or a little earlier? Like you were there like 7 months before you were on like Polygon, for example.
But the thing with chains like Avalanche is they're kind of what we call alternative layer ones. They're not places that people like to be all the time, like Ethereum is, right?
Right.
So on major assets, things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDT, how do you get people to put those assets onto these chains and then provide liquidity in these decentralized exchanges? It's very hard. You have to do it through giving away your token or whatever, and then that's inflationary. That's bad. So people weren't doing it, right? But because the way that we're able to do it is very capital efficient, it's easy for us to do. So during the bear market, I think a lot of the assets on these chains, we call it TVL. It's the amount of money basically on these chains started to dry up. And then that's when our strength become really apparent. And I think that played a huge role.
Definitely. Okay, now I'm going to get really in the weeds with you. Sorry, I'm a total woo nerd here.
Let's go in the weeds.
So you guys have 800 million tokens that are vested, right? Or they're not vested. They are part of like a community wallet, but they're in circulating supply. There's like 1.6 billion Woo in circulating supply, but these are not exactly in circulating supply. What's going on with these tokens, and is there any plan to deal with them?
At the beginning, the network had a very long time frame. We wanted rewards to allow people to like grow and stake, and some partnership. Maybe we need tokens. So, we had rewards for that, but then people were a little bit dissatisfied, as they rightly should be. It's like, you have all these tokens, what are you going to do with them? So we ended up staking them in this 5-year time lock contract where we actually can't touch them. So they're technically, in circulation because they belong to us, but we're not able to touch them. So this is something that was a very big issue at the beginning. Is like, how are you going to expand the token supply without inflating people? And so this is something we did to try to bring more clarity on that front.
I gotcha. That makes sense.
That wasn't very in the weeds, though. I thought you were going to go really in the weeds.
Sorry, I'll get really in the weeds. Let's go, bro.
Don't challenge him.
No. I don't want that.
Pick your brain for hours.
Well, I love this stuff. So, but
yeah.
Okay. Where do you see Woo in 2 years? Not to get too in the weeds.
Great question. No, I think the goal for us, right, is always around a couple of things. One is acquiring market share by volume, right? How much trade volume is happening through us versus happening through everyone else. So if we do our job right and we make the right decisions, then, you know, I do believe that we could be like a top 3 exchange, right? Which is the top, right? And on the DeFi side, there's no question we could do something similar. Top 3 is it's a pretty elite group when you have things like Uniswap and Curve. Like these are the heavyweights, but I think we deserve to be in that discussion. So 2 years, like we say, tier 1 for all of those. You know, I also expect that the value of the network denominated in the market cap should be a lot higher than it is now. I mean, if you look on CoinMarketCap, we're like 124th, but I think the value that we bring to users deserves, you know, without saying anything that might be misconstrued as me saying financial things will happen. I just think that
I know.
the value we're providing to users is a lot higher than when you look at like what's the person right above us, what's the person 2 spots above us, and our opportunity, our potential if we do become a top 3 CeFi exchange or a top 3 DeFi exchange. So those are 2 metrics you could look at and say this is really going to improve. I shouldn't say improve. Just 2 metrics that we want to focus on. And household name, right? I want Steve. That's my personal goal. I want Steve to walk down the street in a chain and everyone goes, that guy was so early. He was such a genius.
One time. It's happened one time so far. Someone's like, yo, you know about Woo? I was like, you know about Woo. Holy shit. It's happened one time so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We'll get there. We're getting it's a fight. It's a battle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love it. No, so just to piggyback on that real quick, has your vision for Woo shifted or kind of stayed the same? Like, obviously, the landscape's always moving. But since you guys started your mission statement, would you say that it's changed at all, or is it sort of intact?
Yeah, absolutely. It changed a lot. Like we started out when I joined, we were kind of trying to be more of like a what we call B2B, business to business. Like, so if there's an exchange, we provide them liquidity on the back end. That's it. We don't touch retail users. It's a much smaller fight to pick because everybody likes you. The regulators don't care about you, and that's fine. But the scope is scaled so much. And then DeFi happened while I was at the company. DeFi was not a thing when I joined. And so when we realized our talents were applied very well to DeFi, and then all of a sudden it became multi-chain DeFi. And then our talents even more applied. So, I mean, I think every year I get more and more excited about what we're doing. And even now with the kind of the reshuffling, like it wasn't clear maybe a year ago, like how were we ever going to compete with Binance? How are we ever going to compete with FTX? And not in like a, let's like take all their market share, but like how can we compete on like brand recognition and like marketing resources? Like they're buying, Crypto.com's buying the Staples Center. Like how are we ever going to get there? Right. But then the bear market just destroyed everyone's marketing budget. We found out finances were not as good as they were. Suddenly users had huge trust issues. And then so it's like the whole thing kind of shuffled back the playing field to where it's a lot more even now. And so I do see a path forward that maybe wasn't so obvious a year ago, to where that scenario I mentioned where you walk down the street and everyone that visionary Steve, that could happen, a lot sooner than I thought.
Bro, well, just to wrap up with you, I'm very appreciative of your time, by the way. Thank you for coming on with us. But I have to say, it's one of those things where I know I'm covered in Woo merch, so I really shouldn't get to speak from a neutral point of view. But you guys really did prove you do more walking than talking, I think. Like when you guys burned 20% of your supply, or what was it, 26% of the supply, 27%, there wasn't a pre-pump. Like you guys really, I don't know what you're doing over there or like how you're doing it, but I haven't seen things like this in crypto typically, right? Normally I see a pre-pump. Every time there's going to be a Coinbase listing, we see pre-pumps. You guys don't really do that. What's going on over there?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people ask me questions similar to this, and like things like, like, do you believe in what you're doing at Woo? Like that's kind of the basic question. And I think my answer is always the same. It's like if I didn't believe in the mission and I didn't believe that the people I was working alongside with are people I want to be on a mission with, then I would have left, a long time ago. Because it's actually, the churn rate in crypto is very high. Like people bounce around from job to job, and there's no shortage of opportunities because every 6 months there's this new next best thing startup, right? Ever since I joined, I think, it helped that the founders came from a very experienced traditional finance background. So they're very aware of like legal systems and what things they can do and what things they can't do. And then they're also aware of, they're not like people who are desperate. Maybe they see an opportunity to make a bit of money on the side, right? And they're not as inclined to do that, right? They're thinking more big picture. How do we grow? How do we become one of the biggest companies in the world? So that to me, really resonates. And actually, a funny story about like a company, we have some advisors who sometimes, if we have internal decisions that we want to like discuss over, and these are people who have experienced at other exchanges or other businesses previously. And the one that we talked to recently listened to some of our challenges that we're working on in our strategy. And one of the first things she said when she walked out of the room was like, I'm really surprised by like the sense of ethics that everyone has at the team. Like it never once came up that, let's just cut the corners and pipe the project. And, these are things that I think are very easy for short-term thinkers in crypto to do. It doesn't take a lot, pay some influencer to hype your coin, and then
you don't got to pay me, baby. I do it for free, baby, all day.
Yeah, we appreciate that, but I think that's the people we attract. That's the culture of the company. That's something I take pride in, and I think even if you look at Web 2 companies, the ARC. It wasn't the grifters that ended up winning out. It was the people who had a long-term vision and were very technically skilled and disciplined, right? That succeeded. So we expect the same thing to happen in crypto.
I love it. I appreciate you so much. And real quick, from my friends at WooForce, I do have many friends in WooForce. When merch, they asked me to ask you. When merch?
When merch?
This is a tricky one because we actually bring a lot of merch to events. So, we're going to be doing some events around the world. I don't know if we're doing any in Southern California. The whole U.S. thing, it's a bit tricky.
Yeah. International waters?
Yeah. But if the Iceman was to rock up to one of our events in Europe or something, then he would walk away with a very, very large handful of merch. Maybe we'll have to send him some merch as well.
Let's go.
Nice.
I think I've spent probably thousands and thousands of dollars on Woo merch, so that would be sick. I mean, look at this sucker.
Maybe I should be asking you for merch. That is amazing.
I'm telling you. Well, you guys made this one. This one's you
your
guys.
merch distributor.
Yeah. But credit to you guys on this one.
The question.
Okay, we'll talk. We'll talk. But credit to you guys on this. This is like a quality garment. I love this thing very much. I have two of these. I love it.
Quality garment.
Yep.
I love that.
So that's all the time we got. Ben, do you want to do some closing thoughts for the folks?
How would you rate our performance, Nikki? Do you think we managed to pull it off and convince your users that crypto is not a scam?
I
tell your
think,
listeners?
You know what? For those people who understand cryptocurrency, I think you did you both did a great job of addressing a lot of complex questions that I can only assume were the correct answers to. I do like hearing the passion behind. I mostly listen for, the passion behind like where you see things going, because just like, Warren Buffett, even he'll say, I'm, what he's not well versed in. He's like, I don't know anything about the computers or the internet, but it doesn't mean like, he doesn't believe that they'll succeed. And so whenever I tell people that my husband's into cryptocurrency, I play a lot of poker. And so there's a lot of crossover between poker players and cryptocurrency people. And they ask,
we're just DJing all the way over here.
Yeah,
Ben,
like that. Yeah. We're in Vegas, by the way, too. So DJ capital of the world. Yeah, and they asked me about like, oh, what did you think about like this crash and blah blah. I get the benefit of being on the outside mostly of like it doesn't affect me, but I don't have the emotions associated with it because even though Steve had a lot of Terra Luna,
way too much.
I think overall, when we have discussions, it's about where he sees the technology going, and that's more important to me than the short term crashes or results or whatever. Because I learned a lot about like stocks and value trading versus day trading and all this, options tradings and stuff. And I'm more interested in value investments, which I think Steve does a really good job at in the crypto space of doing a lot of research on the technologies behind a certain product, behind the coins that he buys. And he doesn't have actually a huge diversity in his portfolio of like a ton of different coins. He has like very specific projects where he like really believes in what's going on behind that technology wise. And so when I'm listening, I'm more interested in the vision of where a company sees the technology going and how they plan to change the marketplace and be part of the paradigm shift than me necessarily knowing all the technicalities behind how that operates. So I really appreciate you for coming on the show today and answering a lot of questions that I'm sure a lot of our audience understood, not me in particular, but I can understand on a human level. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on our podcast. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll have to look you guys up when I swing by Las Vegas next time.
Please do, bro.
Yeah,
I will show you around. It'll be fun.
We'll have some drinks.
A couple San Diego kids.
I do play poker, but probably not the level that you do.
No,
hey, she final table at World Series. She final table at World Series, bro. She's legit.
But I'll final table. I'll play cash 1-3 cash and have some Moscow mules. and a fun table in Aria.
Yeah, she'll take your money, Ben. No problem.
We'll play in crypto.
There was actually a crypto poker tournament probably last year, and Doug Polk was like one of the commentators.
Oh, yeah. CoinFlex.
Yeah, I can't remember what the name was. I think I got 14th in that one.
Nice.
So, yeah, I think poker players, they end up transferring to crypto very easily. And even with our team, there's some insane people, some very good poker players within the team.
Sick.
That's awesome.
Yeah, bro.
Well, we'll have to have a home game sometime.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you for having me.